Yeah, I think the body will agree. All right, let me, no, I'm in a meeting now. Where are you at?
Yeah, the only way for you to see that is if you want to.
All right, let's get started. We're not waiting on anybody. Wes is on his way. All right, we'll give 2 minutes for Wes, if that's okay. I forgot to order a lamp. I was looking at him. Melissa ordered it, right, Melissa?
Is it? He's like, it's American.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. Just so you know, just let
Okay.
me know. Just, I didn't want to announce it.
Okay. Jeez. Go some bed. We're just giving Wesley 1 minute, if that's okay. Johanny, I believe, is going to be here. She said she would be a few minutes late.
Then Johanny.
So let's go to 5, 6 after. What time is it? Oh, we'll go to 12 after. Oops. Well, Judy held me up in the elevator. No, I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding, bro. See, Judy, you sit around the table, you get thrown under it, right? That's the way it works. I don't know how I do in the state, but here, if you're a guest. Oh, I'm so tired today. I can't stand it. Oh, my God. I hate Mondays.
Yeah, but if we didn't have Mondays, then we'd hate Tuesdays because it's the same thing.
No, not for me. I have more energy Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah. Mondays are just tough.
The worst it would be is Friday.
Well, nobody would show up.
Then maybe we should change it to Friday.
We'd be at the Pike, or something.
Oh, that might be, is that the mayor?
All right, we knew this meeting set up. We knew we'd have problems, but. Which one's the real Frank? That's the question. All right, let's get started. I didn't know, Linda, we had asked a number of legislators. Was Judy the only one that responded, or?
No, Mark Rossi responded too. He's supposed to zooming in. He hasn't connected.
Okay, so we'll see if Mark connects, and we'll just welcome Judy to our meeting and to the table, actually. Thank you for filling the District 1 seat. Okay. It's only 4. I know, I'm teasing. All right. So, Judy, we'll open it up for you. Just kind of provide us an update, what you think is coming forward at the state that may or may not impact us. And then, we'll go around the table and see if there are any additional comments. Here comes Johanny. So we'll just let her get situated here in a minute, and then we'll turn it over to Judy. It's like Wesley's joining us via.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna make sure your little green circle's on.
All right, go ahead, Judy. We'll turn it over to you to get started.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for inviting me. This is probably a long overdue forum for all of us in terms of, the interaction and the communication that we could have with City Hall. So I'm pleased to be here. And to start with the interesting news, with the redistricting, you now have 4 representatives in state government to represent you. You not only do you have me as state senator, but you will have 3 state representatives. So that's got to be a good thing, having 4 people. I think Philadelphia maybe trumps us, or Pittsburgh, but nevertheless, I think we're doing pretty well with that. So what I had hoped tonight was to talk about some things that, we have worked on together. Hello, Chief. And what we can do in the future, some of the grant opportunities that are coming up. And I hope it can be a 2-way street. so that, I can question some of the things or ask you what you need, and you can tell me what you need as well. So starting out, let's, think about some of the things that we've been able to help with. Of course, we all know about First Energy Stadium, which I think is just such a great success story for the whole Commonwealth. And I think anyway, that originally we weren't to have the amount of money that we got, but the governor actually put an extra $1 million in because I think of the cooperation that he saw among state legislators. So that's certainly a good thing. 3 million of that, by the way, was from the Senate Democrats. The way this money works sometimes is that the different caucuses, the Senate, the R's and the D's, and the House, the R's and the D's, and the governor's office, get allocations for, things like RACP, the big capital improvement projects. So that was our commitment there. Of course, we put funding into $4 million into Alvernia, University College Town. 2.25 million went into the Medical Arts Building. 1.5 million into the Berks Trust building. 1.75 into the Pearl Vision Building, right next to the Santander Arena. 1.5 just recently went to the Trexler Mansion. And 1 million actually went to the Albright Library as well. And that was just in major projects that state funding came through. In multimodal and transportation funding, there was the 18th Wonder Project, one of my favorite ones. And we've been at the table for a while on that. Total right now, we have about $1.5 million of state funds that went into that. And then, of course, there were housing tax credits, the funding that had gone into the Abe Lincoln, Barley Square, Gateway West, and the Riverside Townhomes. And I was on board for that one as well. So what's coming up? And well, let me just say what at the start, I sometimes hear people say Reading's not getting, the funds it should be getting. We're getting the funds we should be getting, and we can get more. And, that potential is there by working together. So I just wanted to make sure that came up. But what's coming up, there's some grant streams that are open now. Act 13, which is the funding that came out of the Marcellus Shale wells. Even though we don't have any drilling right here in Berks County, we still get some income, some revenue from that. So that's actually open now, and it's closes on May 31st. And so that puts funding in for greenways, trails, and recreation. You can ask for about 250,000 maximum, and it's a 15% local match. We always have to remember that some of them have match components to them. And those of you that have applied for them know that. There's a flood mitigation and improvement funding, again, 15% match. Sewage facilities program. We've used that for other communities, but we also use that to help with the sewage treatment plant and watershed restoration, which might be something that you'll want to think about as you look at some programs coming up. DCED multimodal funding, that is open now, opened March 1st, and that'll be closing July 31st. That's up to $3 million that's available for that, but that has a 30% match. Sometimes it's waived. So that's good. PennDOT does another one exactly like that. There's one for the Department of Community and Economic Development, but there's one for PennDOT too. And then there's all the DCNR, the conservation grants and DEP. And Reading has made out very well on those. When you look at your trail, network that you have, C2P2, Growing Greener. They support feasibility studies, but also enhancements too. And what's new is now that we have a level 4 casino in Morgantown, Berks County, as is in that funding pool. So we have the LSA statewide grant, and I think the mayor might have talked about that at one of the meetings. That closed March 15th. but that's a minimum of 25,000 and a maximum of $1 million, no local match. It's for capital improvement projects, including equipment and vehicle projects. And I know you had applied, I think, for $1 million for the Police Training and Operations Center. Is that the one that's in Cumru Township? Is that where that's going to be? Is that a joint project with Cumru?
It's actually on our land, it's adjacent. to
It's
our ways,
just
right?
in Cumru.
Yeah, it just happens to be in Cumru. but
Okay.
It's on our parcel.
I saw that and I wondered about it. So, I do look at these, so thank you. There's another one opening up soon. And this will, we'll learn more about it, same requirements and the same eligibility to it. But that one we'll get an announcement on relatively soon. And of course, because you've used them, some of the Department of Community and Economic Development, revenue stream enhancement grants, Keystone communities like Main Street, special improvement districts, and the early warning, but now you're moving out of, which by the way, congratulations, Act 47. And then there's also the PCCD. Marcia, I know you're very well aware of them because you've used them in your work, in your professional life. And those are grants for community, addressing community violence. Those are opportunities are there, oftentimes for nonprofit organizations, but also sometimes for municipalities too. So, there's lots of opportunities there. And, as we look at some of the issues that we face, particularly on crime, that's probably something we really ought to focus on. One thing I need to alert you to, though, is when you work with nonprofits, make sure that they actually have nonprofit status. We had one who actually got an award, but was not truthful in their application. And they didn't, the funding had to be withdrawn. That was a pretty stunning phone call when I got that. But if you're working with communities, you could help them, or with those groups, you could help them on that. But to me, that really seems like one of the things that we absolutely have to go after. And I'm sure I am, and I know that I assume Representative Razi and Representative Guzman would be at the table too, to be able to help you. So we've gotten some things, you've done well, and that doesn't even count the school district. And, some of the things that we have done there. I know a few years ago, I was able to get $500,000 to hire social workers for the high school.
Right.
Probably could use 10 more.
Yeah.
So just to give you an idea of what's going on.
Well, thank you, Judy, for the update. You're right. There's a lot of money flowing into the city from the state, and we know you're up there with the others advocating for us strongly. We appreciate that. I would like to open it up for questions or comments by council members. And then I might have a comment as well. Marcia, go ahead.
And I think what's important, because some of these funding streams are more annualized, that you see them come every year.
Right.
Some of them may be new because of some new federal funds, but just the planning part, so that you don't react and say, oh my God, a grant's available. Don't mind my language, but that you are prepared to say, this is what the needs of the city are. This is what city funds can, and this is where we're going for grant funding. This is how we're going to leverage other funding. And so this is more to the administration. I think we just need to know what our upcoming projects are going to be, that we're in a readiness state. Now, I think you did that with the LSA. And it was interesting because when we had the presentation, I don't think any of us were aware that you already had a grant pretty well put together that was ready for that funding application. And so I think we need to do that with everything, especially with the PCCD, because they have a lot of requirements for collaboration. And some of them go to the police department, some of them go to nonprofits, but we just need to get ourselves, especially the issue that we're talking about with violence now. We need to be able to make sure, and I'm glad you pointed out, Senator Schwenk, the nonprofits have to be in a ready, stable position to apply for those funds. They're very, very strict about, that you have all your I's dotted and T's crossed. But again, who are our partners that we can work with to make sure people are ready to be able to apply for those funds?
Those are really good points, Councilwoman. Thank
Thank
you. And, I don't see any silver bullet. I know you all have been veterans and have been looking at these issues so closely. There's no single solution. And there are multiple agencies working together that could, could possibly really help us. We have to build capacity, in my view, and starting with younger children so that, we can get them acclimated to how they, what we want for them and help them to grow up to be productive citizens. But it does start with trying to leverage all the resources that you can get, not just government, but there's foundations as well. Do
Right.
you have a grant writer on board now, or what's the status of that?
We do have a city grant writer.
Yes, we do.
You do?
We have a grants
Okay.
coordinator that just started recently. in the last
Great.
6 months.
Yeah.
Great.
Right, additional comments? Anyone? Get your mic, please.
I think one of the things we'll be certainly looking at as we come out of Act 47 is trying to build up our police force. I know a lot of these grants often don't cover that sort of thing. What do you see from the state standpoint that may help us increase our numbers on the police force going forward as we exit Act 47?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because to me, that's one of the things that we really have to work hard on. As I've looked at the police component over the years, we are bare bones. We certainly have larger problems than we've had in the past, less staff. That's just not a recipe for success.
And a larger population.
Yeah,
too.
yes, our
Because we know the
population's-
census numbers may not actually be true based on what we're hearing.
Right, right. One of, certainly there are grants sometimes, Councilwoman, that come out of PCCD, the commission. Most of them, however, are only for like a 2 or 3 year span. That's one of the things, and you know what, I heard President Biden announced his budget today, and police funding was part of that. But again, those things only last for a number of years. On my way in today, I passed a sign on Fifth Street that said, "You are entering a weed and seed community." How many of you remember that? I hadn't seen that sign there. I remember it. I was a county commissioner then. This was a federal, federal grant, a huge one that the county and the city and United Way actually.
Does that still exist?
No, it doesn't exist anymore. And that's the point. So, some of those things are really great, but they don't last forever. It worked for the period of time it was there. It worked with a concentrated effort, and it also brought in more, policing resources, state police, federal, FBI and ATF, that type of thing were there as well.
Is there any way you can advocate for that, Judy, on the state level to get that started again and work with the federal partners?
Absolutely. If I knew that city council was, in other cities, that might be something to go to the League of Cities about, to talk about. You're not the only city that's facing these issues. That, I think, would be really helpful.
All right, additional comments or questions, anyone? Frank?
Senator, on behalf of the mayor, thank you to you and your staff for being very helpful in providing our office grant opportunities. Grant opportunities become available. We always get a list of those. And these grants, some of them are kind of complex. You always help us navigate, through the process. And we're very appreciative. And, a lot of the success we have had is because of that type of assistance and awareness. So on behalf of everyone in the city, we appreciate all the assistance you've been giving us over the years.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I've got a secret weapon, Tom Gumbar. Nobody knows more about state grants than Tom does. I'm giving you credit, Tom, if you're listening. I don't think you are. However, you have a relative here that can pass that message on to you. But he does know his stuff.
I'll text him right now.
You'll let him know? Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Judy, so just a couple of thoughts. First of all, as you mentioned, we are leaving Act 47, and you're well aware, you and I have had the discussion about the commuter tax, and you just can't get that entity up in
I'm not making any
Harrisburg.
promises on that, Jeff.
Yeah.
They won't raise taxes on anything.
Yeah,
Even when they talk about eliminating school property tax, and everybody rails about it. but you have to raise another tax.
It-
The money
it's-
has to come from somewhere.
Yeah,
They
and
don't want to do it.
I've always wanted to get in front because it's like a state prodigy. I mean, they've created this law, Act 47, to protect us primarily from Act 111, and they've given us this tool as we're trying to stay protected from that to kind of get ourselves re-geared, and we have. And I think the DCED and the PFM have been a wonderful oversight tool for us.
You
But
had,
then,
you had a great expert.
yeah, and then suddenly we're exposed back to it, and then the tools are taken away. And it'd be great if all right, we're exposed back to it, but we still have the tools. So I know you and I have had that discussion. The other issue, I wanted to thank you for your work on the fireworks law. So when I sit around in the city of Reading, because where it works in central PA or northern PA, the small town of Eagle Spot, whatever, can light up a couple fireworks. It doesn't work in our cities. And
No.
in places like Reading, where that kind of activity, I think the violence is being spurred on by, and there's a lot of unknown reasons to your point, because, ever since 2020, nobody's been able to figure out what has caused this huge spike of violence. But I know the little things, people getting away with driving their mini bikes in packs of 15, 20, 30 people. That's fueling attitude. At the end of the day, it's given younger people a sense of aggression. And when they are confronted on a one-on-one or a two-on-two basis, that stuff's coming out. The fireworks law has created this environment where it's anything goes, and it's not one or two things, it's a culmination of things, but that's a state law for me that said, wow, I mean, for $6 million, it's costing us way more downstream. And maybe, I think a child was killed last year in York, if I
Right.
remember, but
That's correct.
it's feeding the violent nature a little bit. And, it's not the only thing, like I said, it's one of many. And I know you tried to push them harder on their watered down version
Right.
of the
right.
bill.
And a lot of senators and representatives, particularly those of us that represent more urban areas, have said the same thing. You're putting these parameters in place, or, saying at certain times and so forth. But the trouble is, now this stuff is available. If you talk about lawlessness, you're not going to follow the rules. It's
No.
almost too late to try to, to restrict the time period. To me, it's take them off the table.
Yeah, and I'm the
Remove
one,
them from
I'm the type that would have went the other direction. I would have made sparklers illegal, honestly, because the 4th of July, it's great, that you go to the stadium and there's a controlled environment and you get to see it professionally done. There's really no need for even little kids to be walking around with snaps and this and that. I mean, I don't, the one year I had to meet my daughter because she was driving through Reading with my grandchildren. They were all petrified. She could drive. They were both crying, and they're just driving through. Imagine, some of the seniors and
When
the
it's right next
pets
door to you.
and the children. Yeah, it is something that's, and again, you're right. A lot of the urban senators have pushed. I just don't know why some of these guys don't accept it. And I think it's hard for them to retract anything because it looks like they made a mistake, but
Especially when the manufacturer and the sales distributor is invited to come
yeah,
to our hearing on this. And then it just becomes so obvious,
wow.
exactly what's happening there.
All right,
Yeah.
if there's any legislation, I know, didn't Harrisburg have they had the 3 times the 52? Did that ever get through up there?
Which one?
The $52 tax that,
Oh, yeah.
they have
Yeah.
they have a version that's 3 times that, right? Anything we could do, to shore up our ability to cover some of that 3.3 million that we're losing would be very helpful. We're at a very good place financially, but in the city, it can change quickly.
Sure. And it won't last forever, even
No,
if
and
you're
we never
very
have
careful with it.
our 5-year projections already showing, deficits. And I was talking to the mayor about it. I said, Mayor, I've been here since, oh, thank you. Wow. Are you sure? I'm gonna cough more often. I was talking to the mayor. I said, Mayor, we've never had a 5-year projection that goes like this, it's always been that way. So, we always tweak and adjust, but
I'm really proud of the way that all of you have been able to, come out of this process stronger and much more fiscally responsible. Not that there was, flagrant misspending, but, the guidance I think was really helpful. But yes, you have to have a revenue source to be able to pay for the things that you need. That's the problem.
Well, and we've turned a lot of knobs. I was talking to Deneen up in Lancaster. They have very limited a number of dials that they can adjust. And she was actually envious because, we can do this, real estate transfer, EIT, and,
Right.
a number of things that they didn't have the flexibility on. Just good and bad, because we can also shoot ourselves in the foot with some of that. So,
Yeah, you need to remain vigilant.
You gotta remember that applies to creators and residents. And
Oh.
residents are already paying 3.6.
yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah. So oops. But yeah, if there's any other options, if you get the LST, say it was Frank's idea. Always use Frank's name, Judy. No, I'm only kidding. All right. Anything else for Judy? I know you probably had a,
Just
Go ahead,
one more
Judy.
thing I'd like to mention is I do serve on the local government commission, and most of the bills that affect the second class, cities of all classes and the county and boroughs as well, that comes through the local government
Good.
commission. And Linda has been really helpful in bringing issues up to us, and we run some things by her as well. There is legislation now that, based on population, would allow you to move into a second-class city code. I don't know what the benefit of it would be necessarily, but that possibility is there, and I'm glad to explore it with you if you'd like to take a look at it. Right now, it's just Scranton that serves in that.
yeah, I
capacity.
think down the road, Judy, it's something we'd at least like to know more about.
Right.
But it's, yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of
We're
inherent.
third class now.
No, we were designated second class,
You
like, weren't we? Like, I thought we got a letter
I
from
think we have
Tom
the
Moore.
option to
You have the
pursue it.
option
There's a
to be.
whole
So we-
process on.
And at this point,
Right.
I'm not hearing of a lot of inherent benefits other than kind of a title change, more or less, right?
Right, right. So I'll continue to research that for you. That legislation is moving
Okay.
forward, so we'll see what happens with
Unless you
it.
get the payroll tax to apply only to second class. Then become-
Hey, just sneak that in, Judy.
That
you
kind of
just slide that
special
in.
narrow legislation. There you go.
Just attach it on the last page.
Maybe Scranton would be on board too.
That's
I'm
right.
sure they would.
Jamar had a comment? Jamar, do you mind going to the podium just because we're filming? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Council President. Just two comments. One, we did have Gordon and his team research what, if any, benefit would come from a change in status. And so far, there's no financial benefit to that. So we did preliminary look into that a couple months ago. Senator Schwank, is there any hope for the radar bill, do you think, to be passed? Just curious. about
What is that, Bill? I'm sorry. Just,
Radar, so the ability for local police forces to use radar guns
I
for
hope-
traffic enforcement.
yeah.
Tomorrow it comes up every session.
Watch your
And
dance
for
floor.
some reason, it gets squashed. I know I voted for it. It's gone through the Senate
Oh,
and then it gets stopped in the House. So
Well, watch what you ask for, right? You got drivers like Donna and Johanny.
Decided the Chambers United.
I'm only kidding.
Right?
I'm referring to myself, actually. That's. All right.
Does
Are
that
there
work
any
on
additional comments?
scooters? I don't know, or those little motorbikes and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if the radar will help on that or not. but-
Right, yeah. Well, they're hard to catch. I mean, they have a real advantage in the fact that they can get through the police have done an excellent job of trying to curtail it. It's just there's so many.
Yeah,
And again, the one attitude feeds the other attitude. So it's this cumulative effect. I mean, you got people blaring their music, they get away with that. You get people driving mini bikes up. I mean, I literally saw them fly up the sidewalk the one time at Fifth and Spring. If a kid would have stepped off, could have got killed, but it's that cumulative effect.
Once we release the video of the crushing part, that should slow things down.
Yeah, oh, that's good. I like
Which one?
Well, there was 50 of them.
Oh, that were crushed. Yeah, I don't,
So that
Ed-
video is coming out.
you would think, you would think a couple of them getting killed, which has happened, would have deterred people, but it doesn't.
thank you for inviting me to come in. I really appreciate it. I welcome, a call or email from any of you. And again, I appreciate the work that all of you do. I'm proud to represent the city of Reading.
Well, thank you, Judy. And our hope is to invite you in maybe once or twice a year just to keep
Sounds good to me.
Excuse me, Jeff. I just had a brief comment. Thank you, Senator. I just want to say that, I mean, the city, as we know, is well financially right now, but we just had to keep a pretty close eye to make sure that in 5 years, we don't go back to a 47 like it happened in the past. So financially, we're very stable right now, but if we don't take a pretty close eye on our finance, it can go down the hill in a couple of years. And I believe we are that. Thank you.
And if you say that, I know that's true. I have a lot of confidence in you and the work you've done.
Yeah, thank you. Wes, any comments or questions at this time? Just want to make sure we have Wes on board here. Want to make sure he has any.
No, I don't have any. Actually, I do. Hi, Senator Schwank. Thank you for coming to talk to us. You had mentioned getting more social workers. Can you tell me
Yes.
about that? What grant? What's the name of that grant for getting more social workers?
So that funding, Councilman, came out of discretionary funding that came through the Department of Education. And we reached out to the school district and talked with them about their specific need. This was under the prior superintendent, Dr. Muneem. So that's where that funding came from. That was a once in a while kind of occurrence where that funding comes up, but sometimes they happen, they can happen again. So I certainly keep my eye out for it. And I've got to say that I understand that the new Dr. Murray, the new superintendent, has invited us as legislators to come in and to talk with us about, which I appreciate, rather than each of us individually, asking or saying, what can we do to help? Working together seems to be the model that will work the best. I did have a group of teachers come in maybe 8 weeks ago. And the circumstances that they talked about are really concerning, regarding security, as you know, in the school and staffing that there just aren't enough teachers. So there's things we could work on, but we're limited sometimes by, the availability of people.
All right. Thank you, Wes. Any other questions? All right. So, great. Johanny?
Just a quick follow-up to that. Do you foresee maybe opportunities for us to start having meetings as a collective?
Why
With the
couldn't
school,
we?
with city council, because it's, as you mentioned, I mean, if we started working together and collaborating, we probably could get a lot more accomplished.
I really
and-
think-
and
And the county.
Yes, and the county as well. So I know that there's a commission or a committee or a board, right, that we're supposed to be meeting with the school district, but I'm not sure where a committee, but we haven't met. I'm not sure where the status of that is yet. Can we revisit that? Maybe that's a start. Yeah.
I believe so, yes. We had some conversations, so I'll have a follow-up for the body.
Thank you, Frank. And thank you, Senator Schwank. Appreciate it.
bet. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Judy. And appreciate your time being here this evening. Yeah, tell Jimmy I said hello, please. Judy, thank you. All right, we're going to move on and we have I wouldn't say super busy agenda, but we have to have an executive session at the end of this committee, the whole meeting. So I just want to be cognizant of time. Mike, you wanted to give us an update regarding appointments to the redevelopment authority?
Yeah, this won't take long. I think everyone's aware there's a vacancy on the board of the redevelopment authority currently. In speaking with Fred over the last couple of weeks, he brought this to our attention that there was a change in the law back in 2020 that kind of slipped through during COVID that none of us were paying attention to. But basically what it did was it amended the urban redevelopment law in order to change the appointment power for these boards from the mayor specifically to city council. So that is something that you have the specific power to appoint now per this state law. So just wanted to update you on that. I know your nominating committee, meets often, so I think that should be on the agenda at some point in the near future to find a replacement for that.
Yeah, we currently have one opening, is that? One opening currently?
Yes.
Yeah, I would encourage if anyone knows anyone, including the administration, that would be interested in that. I think it's still a kind of a bilateral effort. I still think we should be working together and trying to find candidates.
And that's my, I'm sorry, go ahead. Hey, Council President, with the zoning board, the police civil service and fire civil service, on paper, on the matrix, it's council's appointment, not the mayor's, but traditionally, when somebody would be interested in applying even for these positions, they usually come to the mayor's office to see if the mayor's comfortable with those. So I wasn't sure that practice, I guess you would call it, right? That customary practice, would that continue also for the redevelopment authority as we do?
Well, I don't know that, we won't go out and seek people, but I think if the mayor has somebody he thinks would be a good candidate, that you move it forward to us for the redevelopment. Well, let me get other opinions here. Let's see where people stand. Go ahead, Doug.
Just to keep it fair to the public, I think the application process should be clearly stated so that no one would get the feeling they were either favored or not favored by the mayor or any of us sitting around this table, that it goes through the application process, goes to nominations, it's evaluated, and then a recommendation comes to us. We know in the past that people have gotten different feelings, different thoughts of where support lies, and I would hate to have anyone positively or negatively influenced by a meeting. That's just my feeling.
I guess my concern is for zoning, police and fire, which is clearly the governing body's purview to make an appointment. Like I said, it's always customary that when somebody applies for that, that would come to the mayor's office and the mayor would say if he supported it or not. So even though it's not required by law, because the law says it's a governing body. So I think there was and I don't know all the details. I think when this matrix was done by the previous solicitor 2 or 3 years ago, there was an understanding that would be the general process, with the only exception of the parking. And I don't know how true that to be, so.
Before we go to Marcia, what's your understanding of that? Because I'm not into those details. I don't know. I mean, that workflow, is that what was in place and what we're still continuing to do?
A few years ago, that switched. Prior, it was divided. The appointments were divided between council and the administration. And then at some point in time, council said, no, mayor, you can appoint them all and we'll confirm them.
Okay, so it's something we've been doing.
Yeah, and it's had its glitches over time, because sometimes, the mayor's office with, dealing with everything they're dealing with, sometimes that's not a priority, moving those things forward.
All right, so go ahead, Marcia.
And that's the point that I wanted to make, is that there are times that we're waiting for things to be vetted so that then we aren't able to fulfill our responsibility to interview folks. So I would rather be able to have everything come to a central point, be able to be clear legally who has the oversight appointments, and that we just inform the mayor that these are who we're going to be interviewing. And then if there's any question about it, that, we have some dialogue, but I would rather follow what the legal parameters. For instance, we will never interview anyone for the parking authority because we understand what the law says on that.
Yeah, if it's parking, I have a problem if the mayor has a recommendation for somebody to refer it to us, even if we still were collecting them all centrally. Frank, if there's individuals that really would work for such and such board, and the mayor can point them and say, look, I really recommend this guy, chances are we're going to consider him.
But we're going to, so I understand, so I communicate properly with the mayor. So we're going to be changing the policy that we had up to this time, because we just got a file. Well, the reason I ask you, we got a fire civil service applicant about 2 months ago, a zoning alternate, came to the mayor's office for his approval, even though technically the governing body makes that decision. So is that practice going to cease, or just so I understand?
See, I don't, as long as the mayor knows that if he forwards someone to us, that doesn't mean.
It's coming from the council's office. It's not coming.
So we're sending them over
Yes.
there.
Right.
Yes.
So it is starting with us.
Yes, no.
Then they all go over there.
Okay. So
Everything,
I don't have
yeah,
a
except
problem with
parking.
that workflow at all.
So I don't know, I just wanted to get clarification. Are we changing that practice or we're gonna keep that the same? I
Yeah,
guess it's-
so I don't know that we need to get through this tonight, but we need to talk about it. But so it's coming to us, even though it's our appointment on our own, we're,
All come to us, and then they all go over to the mayor's.
even though it's our appointment.
Correct.
By,
Just to
by
get-
our advice, they go there or they just go there?
They just go there.
Yeah,
So
we don't
we're
ever
not
look at-
directing them to go there.
No,
Okay, well, that's a whole different ballgame.
right.
We can't prohibit people from interacting, nor should
Right.
we.
Yeah.
I
And
just-
I don't have a problem with the way it's working. If it's working, if we were getting held up every appointment, that would be a problem.
Mhm.
If that component of those three boards is working, is it working? For the most part?
Not really.
So let's revisit this.
Yeah.
Okay, because go ahead, Johanny, then Donna, because I don't think we can get through it tonight. But we definitely need to talk about, oh, go ahead.
Okay, I'll use Donna's. It's okay. Thank you. Does it work
Oh,
now?
here, let me
Let's see,
turn it-
let's
let me
try.
turn it
Oh, yeah, yeah, it works. Yay. I would like to follow whatever the process is in place legally, right? I mean, people can go on the website, they can apply for various.
Power.
There we go. Right. So they apply, they get properly vetted, then they come before us for an interview. Right, Marcia? Then, once we make the recommendation, then we vote.
And just as a point of reference, years ago, and I think it was under the McMahon administration, they actually brought the parking authority nominees to council, not necessarily for a vote, but for ratification of their decision. Because I know when I was off council those few years, I was on parking and I was interviewed as anyone else would be by the mayor and by the council, and the council voted on my appointment to parking. It wasn't needed, but it was a really nice conciliatory gesture on the administration's part. So everyone felt that they were a part of everything. So maybe as we look at this, that's another thing to consider, because especially when you look at parking and you look at the sensitivities of things, to know who's there and to actually have spoken with them is probably better for the city. And I would recommend is we may look at things that might be incorporated.
Sorry about that. Okay, I know we talked about this next topic a couple of weeks ago. Are we ready to go into a deeper discussion about this, the charter board costs, or are we still working on some proposed changes?
Yeah, I don't think we have anything formal to present tonight,
Okay.
but Fred and I have been working on it and we're in the process.
All right, so we'll give that in maybe another 2 weeks and then revisit it, okay?
Yeah, I think, well, maybe we can circulate it for review.
Yeah, that'd be a great, that would be a great idea. And if you could highlight kind of in 4 or 5 bullet points what the changes are, we could take it from there.
What I said, like, basically, was that I marked up for
Good, good.
what I'll, my next draft will have like a dozen or so whereas clauses.
Yeah,
And then I can use that to mark up copy.
yeah, an executive summary of what the changes mean. That would be the most helpful, if it's 3 or 4 sentences. Because I start reading through marked up copies. I get lost on the first page. I have ADD, so I can't.
Right, and what I was suggesting too is that the final version will have an explanatory section for the public as
All
well.
right, great. So we'll revisit that. Johanny, do you mind, because you're going to chair tonight's meeting, right? you mind doing the agenda review? And then after that, we will see if there's any other items for public discussion, and then we'll go into an executive session.
Sure.
So Johanna's going to be chairing tonight's meeting. You know what? Why don't you take over from here?
Oh, yeah, you want to switch?
Yeah, that way you get used to the,
I mean, I've sit next to him.
yeah, I'm in trouble. I'm behind between Frank and. Oh.
I get to sit in the president's chair. Woo, no. Thank you, Mr. Council President. What an honor to serve as president for the evening in honor of Women's History Month. Okay, so we're gonna get started and we're gonna review the agenda. For invocation, Linda, we're still on with Andrea? Great. And then proclamations, we are recognizing Jamila Kabe. So, Mr. Waltman, President, would you like to do the honors on? Okay. It's right here, okay. So this is for Dr. Betts' daughter. So she wrote a book during the pandemic. So we're honoring her and recognizing her accomplishments. Who would like to do the honors? Yes, so Marcia. All right. Yes, they'll both be here this evening, yep. Okay, so then we're gonna move along with the items of the agenda. We have a award of contract to Simone or Simon? Simone and Collins, Inc., Norristown, PA, to develop an active transportation plan at the cost of $49,998 for Public Works. The plan will focus on downtown Reading and several other corridors and will provide suggestions for creating a more integrated and equitable road network that balances local livability with regional connectivity. Question, Council President, should I be reading these during this time or just? Okay. Oh,
There's currently no one signed up.
okay,
Yeah, you want to go through these now, because sometimes this is the first time I see it.
okay. Do we have anyone from Public Works that wants to give us some background info? Or Mr. Kelly?
Council Vice President, the active transportation plan is going to build on the Downtown Plus plan. It is a specific document that's needed and would need to be adopted by the body so that we can compete for funding to build that active transportation plan. That will include things like specific passenger crossing signals at our intersections, which we currently don't have any. It would look at potentially raising some of our crosswalks to help our persons with disabilities that are moving by wheelchair throughout the community. It would also consider things like bike lanes as well.
So before I open it up to the body, so is this, we're awarding this company to create a plan that we will be able to implement, or is this a study?
It is the creative plan that we can implement
Great, thank you.
and seek funding to build.
Thank you, Jamar.
Quick
Any,
question. The money is coming out of the general fund?
great question. Maria asked if it's coming from the general fund.
It should be identified in the agenda memo. I don't have that in front of me. If memory serves, there's grant funding for this.
From the agenda memo, code 32, 30,000, and then 31, 20,000. I'm not.
Yeah, so that's funded under community development block grant funding.
Okay.
So it's all coming from CDBG
And grant funding.
and grant. Got it. Thank
So
you.
Fund 31 covers our grant funding and Fund 32 covers CDBG.
Thank you. Any questions from the body? Marcia?
It isn't a question as much as a comment. Is this firm has a really good track record working with the city. So I think it's important that we have someone that knows our city and can appreciate what we need to do. So I thank the administration for moving this forward.
Thank you, Marcia. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move along to Resolution B, authorizing the solicitor to execute and submit the approval of the repository bids for 416 Gilson Alley, 1409 Cotton Street, 1027 Perry Street, 752 Schuylkill Ave, and 521 Maple Street. Any comments, questions? No, we'll move along. We have D, award of contract to the Warco Group, Reading, PA, at the submitted price of, oh, whoops, excuse me. Resolution, thank you. That's right. Resolution C, authorizing the mayor to sign the necessary paperwork to effectuate the receipt of payments from PennDOT for the conveyances of temporary construction, slope and drainage easement authorized by bill number 101-2021 related to the Schuylkill Avenue Railroad Bridge project. Right, that did come before us in the past. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Yes, Council President.
Related to that specific project, but I wanted to point out, a few times I've come over the Schuylkill Avenue Bridge and the corner of Bridger Street, they pulled out that northwest corner. Yeah, right. I don't know what the end product's gonna look like. But I just want to-
That's part of the River Road construction project.
Oh, I know, yeah, I know, but it's way out. I
Yes.
mean, it makes the turn challenging.
Yeah.
We'll have to keep an eye on it.
Okay. Now we'll move on to D, award of contract to the Warco Group Reading at the submitted price of $668,200 to upgrade the mechanicals at the Reading Public Library. Do we have anyone to speak on
I
that?
believe in Jamar, correct me, that's the HVAC system, right? It's HVA system, HVAC. We have to upgrade that as quickly as possible because we're coming close to the summer months and we need to make sure the library has some air conditioning. So we're ready to go with that. So that's what that funds are for. Yeah.
Thank you, Frank. Anyone else? All right, so we'll move on to award E, award of contract to AJ Jurek, Aston, PA, at the submitted price of $482,250 for the removal and replacement of an existing section of stormwater outfall pipe to be completed in accordance with the approved erosion and sediment pollution control plan. Is there more? Associated permit restrictions and approved aids to navigation plan for the Schuylkill River. Can someone give us some additional information?
Sure. Down at Heritage Park, which is off Canal Street, that's where we have one of our major stormwater outflow pipes. And I believe I was told about 2 years ago, there was some kind of storm event that created a massive amount of erosion around the pipe area. So we have to replace that, re-solidify it in order to be in compliance with the erosion sediment pollution control plan. But I don't have pictures in front of me, but I'll be glad to send them to council. When you see exactly what I'm talking about, it's a massive piece of like just land that just eroded away. It's a big chunk of land missing. So we have to reshore that up because our pipe goes through there, so it's exposed. So in order to protect it and deal with the erosion, this is something that needs to be done right away.
Thank you, Frank. Anyone have questions or comments? Yes, Donna.
Frank, is that near the force main, that one
Yes.
that we replaced? So,
Yeah, you doing off Canal Street?
yeah,
Yes, is that whole area there is just a section of right along the river, just completely eroded. And
that wasn't because of work done on the force main, was it, that we could
It-
go back and,
I believe it was
get-
from a storm event. I don't know what happened 2 or 3 years ago. It must have been our major, I don't know
so
if the
it's
Schuylkill River.
nothing, it's nothing that was impacted by the construction of that.
No, I think it's a thing of natural, of
Okay,
nature.
okay,
My understanding
okay.
was a natural
Okay,
event.
because that
occurred.
cost us a fair amount of money.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Marcia.
Just as a follow-up to Donna's question, because I live on that side of the city, I can see when we have a major event, how the water comes down off the mountain, goes down Muhlenberg Street, then heads on down to Canal Street, and it's just enormous, the volume of water that comes down through those storm sewers, so.
Thank you. All right, so E, award of contract to Telco Inc., Reading, PA, at the submitted price of $258,447 for a traffic signal improvement project for 5 intersections that require various traffic signal items to be installed, replaced, and/or upgraded. Any comments, questions? Seems pretty
Where at?
self-explanatory.
Good question.
Oh,
'cause
where? Yes.
That's a good question because it's not in the agenda memo. So, and I did some research quick to make sure I knew the answer. So, and thanks to Kyle, got me the answer this morning. So for these 5 intersections are going to be it's replacement, repair from knockdown poles at 4th and Penn, 4th and Court, 3rd and Bunwood, Center Avenue, Windsor Street, and 5th and Burn. Those are the 5 locations.
Where did you say, on Center
sorry.
Ave?
Yeah, Center Avenue and Windsor Street,
Windsor
5th and Burn,
and Fifth. and-
yeah, 3rd and Bunwood, 4th and Court, and 4th and Penn. And these are actually to replace and repair. These poles were knocked down for various reasons. Could be a truck or maybe some kind of particular event. So those are the 5 locations that are going to be replaced.
Thank you. Okay, and then we will have, that will be followed by administrative report, and I'm going to assume that Mr. Dembowski will be reporting on behalf of the mayor. And then we'll have our report from our auditor, Maria. And then we have a report today by the Animal Control Board. We have a Rich Rosado, so he knows to be here. Oh, Zoom, great, thank you. Okay, and then we have ordinances for final passage. We have, now at this point, Mr. Council President, the new ordinances you pass on for Marcia to read, right?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
These, again, if somebody has questions, we go back through it. We need to, most of these we covered,
Right,
but there still might be some follow-up.
Okay.
Especially with the contentious ordinances out there.
thank you. So we'll read them out. So bill number 17-2022, approving settlement agreement pertaining to the outstanding loans related to the bookbinder building at 148 North 4th Street.
Yes, I'm gonna ask that we make a motion to withdraw this item at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay,
You might want to make note of that. I'm going to agenda approval.
so in section 5 of the agenda, I mean, right, 5 consent agenda legislation, is that where I would say we're withdrawing? Now, do we need to explain to the public at all why we're doing this? Okay, great, thank you. So that's withdraw. Okay, the next bill be 18-2022, amending City Code Chapter 576, Vehicles and Traffic, Section 420, parking against the traffic flow by exempting vehicles parked in violation of the section due to winter weather conditions. I know we spoke at length regarding that. Does anyone have any questions?
This is a different one. I think it's the 11th.
Right, this is related to the weather right.
Is this the one related to the weather?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was hoping we could have a deeper discussion with that.
Your mic, so that everyone can hear you, please.
Yeah,
Thank
it was
you.
my intent to review them in our next meeting with them. I understand it's 2 weeks out. I would prefer to do that. I mean, it's,
Rather than voting on it.
yeah. So if we could
This
table.
one is so irrelevant to everything, but if you want to do that, that's fine.
And it was tabled, Jeff, at the.
Excuse me, Mike. No, I'm only kidding. Michael Mike's one.
Is this the one where they can park in opposite
Yeah,
directions?
move it around here.
Is it specific streets or just anywhere?
Great question.
I wrote it that it can be anywhere because, winter weather affects people all over the city, but specifically it more applies to those in East Reading. And in East Reading, with the steep slopes, weather events hit them harder than they do other places. Plus, generally, East Reading is the last place to get serviced with ice removal or plowing.
Yeah, and again, I think And I think the authority was mentioning something that it made sense during a snow emergency. And we don't have that defined in here at this point, do we?
Let me make a comment about that. The time that we move into a snow emergency is so rare. The problem is when we have snow on the hills that makes it difficult for you to maneuver your vehicles. So if we want to get into the discussion with them about snow emergencies, I welcome it. But I really feel we're ready to move on this. I don't, accept that as a premise.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I don't believe that we call so many snow emergencies. We call more snow emergencies than are necessary, quite honestly. Maybe not so much Reading, so you may be right, but I don't, there's not gonna be any snow between, well, there could be. There could be snow tonight, right? But between now and the next 2 weeks, I don't see a ton of snow. I think we need some definition. I think if we put this out there without some kind of definition, we allow too much wiggle room. That's my personal belief. And then there becomes a level of dispute. Somebody gets a ticket. Well, the city said I can do this, and it's not as defined as it needs to be. That's my only concern.
You wanted to specifically say snow, like it says winter weather.
Yeah.
Well, winter weather could be 5 snowflakes, you know what I mean? And that's winter weather. So I think you have to have a little.
So,
Motion
Yeah.
for reprimand.
Okay, and I'm not going to vote, I'm not going to agree to table this. They'll see how the vote goes with the body. But my feeling is you can't micromanage microclimate. And by that, I mean, in East Reading, with the heightened elevation, there is a different climate there. I've been in other sections of the city. It gets a lot colder, the snow adheres a lot more. So it can only be a covering of the snow. The hills get that steep that it's difficult to navigate. Okay, so I'm being an advocate for, as I am to be, the district that I represent. And having tried to park on the right side of the hills and bad.
Chief Tonelli, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that if there is an isolated like ice event, which we see frequently, the city isn't going to declare a snow emergency because they don't need to bring out the resources that it would for when we get a foot of snow, which is really when the snow emergency comes into effect. But that ice is going to more negatively impact the people's ability to get in and out of parking spaces and traffic. So I would be very cautious from our standpoint, from the police department standpoint, of requiring that snow emergency declaration, because we're going to have a whole host of problems if we do that and we don't allow folks to park against traffic on those hills and in those locations for events that don't meet the criteria for a snow emergency.
Yeah,
Thanks, Chief.
and that's fair. I mean, we don't necessarily need, especially on, to your point, Marcia, some of those hills in your neighborhood. But do we have a timeline in this ordinance, within 24 hours of a snow emergency? Just so somebody, there's an ice storm, they park and they're there for 4 days. What we don't want to do is create a habit of people seeing it, because one person sees somebody doing it for the right reason. A week later, they're parking that way because they saw somebody else do it. So you just got to be careful in what you create, especially in East Reading, Marshall, where parking is a challenge and people are parked way out beyond the yellow lines almost 7 days a week. And one sees them doing it and the other one does it. We'll make the motion to table. If we don't table it, it'll go as it goes. It's
Can
fine.
we read the bill? Maybe we just need to amend the wording to be more specific, you think?
The other thing to consider is this is now $100 fine. It used to be 35, now it's 100.
It's not the end of the world. I think
Any
that-
additional comments?
Well, I'll make a
Do-
motion to table. If it doesn't table, it's fine. We
Okay.
It's something we can look at down the road if it goes through.
All right, so moving on to Bill 25-2022, amending the City Code, Administrative Code, Section 5-215, Council Districts, as recommended by the Redistricting Advisory Commission. Any comments, concerns, questions? They presented to us sometime last week. We've had some time to think about it, to kind of contemplate, to speak to constituents. Any comments? No? Okay. We're going to move along then to Bill 26-2022, amending the 2022 Human Relations budget by adding $250,000 of ARPA allocation for rental and utility assistance. It was introduced at the March 14th regular meeting. Any comments?
No,
What?
I'm
Wait,
sorry.
your turn, Council President.
Sorry about that. I didn't see- I'm already in trouble with that side.
All right. I'll let Council President go first, and then I'll let, if that's okay with you, Maria, and then we'll give you the floor. Go ahead, Mr. President.
Poor Marcia.
Mr. President, you have the floor.
Oh, I'm gonna be a contentious meeting
Well,
here.
You know, I just want to make
tonight.
sure we have order in the
All
room.
right. Yeah, no, I just think this is a good thing with the funds. I felt we should have maybe done this, some of this a little sooner, but we're getting some in the pipeline, which is good. So that's all.
Maria?
Yes, I just want to add it in that I did my diligence and I looked up the grant that the city received last year, not last year in 2020. The city received 2.2 million for rental to assist resident with rental utility bills. And as of December 31st, 2021, the city still had a balance of 1.2 million that can be used for utility bills and rental assistance. I was talking to Mr. Demosky when I saw the ordinance, and I believe the administration is going to have a process in place that money will be reimbursed. The administration, we reimburse the money that going to be transferred to, that they asking the money to be transferred to human relation. Eventually it's going to come out of the grant money. I mean that the city is not going to use any money from the ARPA to assist residents for the $250,000. That's correct, Frank? Do you want to make any comments on it?
Sure. You mentioned there's a balance of about $1 million some dollars. We plan to draw that funds down, but sometimes when we're in a landlord tenant situation, we're in a timely situation. So by being able to access ARPA funds at the moment gives us more flexibility to turn around to get that check out right away to prevent an eviction. Sometimes we don't get a lot of notice. So the ARPA funds gives that flexibility. When we draw down the community development funds, there's a process. It takes time. We just have to, and sometimes that time isn't a time frame that works for the tenant. So we'll use the ARPA funds if need be immediately so we can get that check out so there's not an eviction, and then we'll be able to reimburse, if we're eligible, be able to reimburse the ARPA funds from community development. But the flexibility is important and the turnaround time is critical. So these ARPA funds will help give us that additional flexibility. And we do plan to draw down those additional community development funds, the $1 million. We believe the needs there, and those will be properly drawn down as needed.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to, for council to be aware of this, and also, you know, for the resident that the city still have money available for that, for rental assistance and utility bills. And that is, we still have funds available from the federal government. So, and if we don't use that money, we don't spend that money. The city will lose the money eventually. I believe the city has until September, probably it could be extended for the day on the use for the money.
So I just want clarity and I want to understand. So what we're saying is that we have $1 million balance in the grant money that was awarded to us.
December 31st, 2021, about 1.2.
And we have
about
to
$1 million.
spend it by September of this year.
I mean, it was an award. I mean, we don't have the money in-house, like Mr. Demosky stated, is we had to draw down the money as we we dispersed the money, we dispersed the money and then we draw down, the administration, we draw down the money.
Can the administration walk us through the process of when a tenant needs assistance, like what's the turnaround time? Because I heard Frank say that there's a process and it takes a while before the grant money is released, correct?
Correct. I don't know, Jamar wants to speak to it, but I don't know, are you able to speak a little bit more about the process? But the community development, once we establish that somebody's eligible, there's a process that somebody has to do in community development. It takes a little bit of time to get entered into the system. They have to do some verifications, and there's a time process. And unfortunately, sometimes during rental and tenant situations, if there's a hearing coming up, there's not a lot of time. So the ARPA funds, and I don't want to create more confusion, so maybe I'll have Jamar, if you're able to walk us through the process, maybe that can help.
No confusion at all for me. I think you
Okay.
explained it exceptionally well, Frank,
Thank you.
already. The main thrust is we need the flexibility. The biggest or key word here being flexibility. There's a specifically designed process to do the drawdowns for a HUD approved rental assistance, utility assistance, potential eviction. That is a many weeks, potentially 2-month-long process that does not conform to a potential eviction. So this program will give us breathing room for immediate issues to be able to keep a potential tenant in their home and not out on the street, while at the same time seeking reimbursement for those that do fall under eligibility for HUD funding. So we're going to do two things at the same time.
Got it. And when you cover an individual's rent, do you pay the landlord directly? Is the rent get paid to the landlord directly?
Yes,
Not the tenant?
no,
Okay,
goes to the landlord directly.
thank you. Does anyone have any questions? No? Are we clear then on that? Yep. Okay, thank you. Melissa? Okay. Mhm. What about Wesley? I don't want to forget Mr. Butler. Any questions, Councilman Butler? Comments?
Yeah. About the 250,000 in ARPA. And I believe, Maria, can you explain about I guess, the other set of money that you're saying we should be using instead of the ARPA? Can you explain that again?
In 2020, like in July of 2020, during the year 2020, the city was awarded by the federal government 2.2 million. That is money can be used for rental assistance and utility bills. And as of December 31st, 2021, the city still had available like 1.2 million out of that award.
And so is there a deadline when we have to spend that money, or?
Yes, the deadline is through September. However, that deadline could change. It's not, haven't been finalized yet by HUD. Why, Mr. Aflac?
Yes.
And while Jamal goes up to speak, just keep in mind, we've already drawn down $1 million and we had no trouble doing that. So we don't think we'll have trouble drawing down the additional funds because the need's there. But I will turn it over to Jamal to give us a detailed explanation.
Yes. Oh, no. The mic isn't on. There we go.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. The city received several grants from HUD. Some of the grants that we received actually are the usual one, and these are the CDBG funds. And part of the CDBG fund is the ESG, which is considered emergency solution grants. We received about $755,000, and that was completely dedicated to the housing program that we have in the city, meaning that if anybody is suffering or having a problem with being employed, unable to pay the rent, unable to pay the utilities, will be given to that. There is also another program called CDBG CV, and that is specifically for the COVID programs. That is COVID-related program. That program cannot be used for other activities. So when we talk about $2.1 million, that is if the tenant is actually impacted by a COVID-related matter, the funds will go in that direction as well. And in fact, some of the activities that we are trying to do at this point in time to find out all projects that can be funded for this through the COVID-related programs. It cannot go any past that time, the COVID program. If it is not related to COVID, it cannot be used. I also, in addition to this, we have two deadlines for this one. By July of this year, we must designate the channel or the project that it's going to. And this has to be completely spent by September of 2023. So in this year, we need to specify where the fund is going. And in September of next year, the fund must be completely used. And that's why we are trying to expedite the process.
Marcia?
And just then to clarify, because what I'm hearing from our auditor is that from her point of view, she believes the money's not going to be spent down, but what you're saying, from your point of view, it will be spent down. So then that justifies spending the ARPA money for the ordinance we have in front of us.
That is correct. The ARPA money, as Mr. Kelly indicated, it's actually a buffer in between, because at a certain point in time when there are families that need this money and the landlord is about to evict them, we need to rush to the rescue. As a result of this, if the funds cannot come through CDBG because we need to scrutinize some of the information, and that may delay the process. For that reason, ARPA funds will come into play, and we will replenish the ARPA funds. The CDBG CV fund is a line of credit. It does not sit in any account in the city itself. We have to apply for it, and we will receive that fund. The other matter that I would like to discuss to the board in there, and that is right now, as we are exiting COVID, we're trying to find out projects which actually COVID related. For instance, in our project management program that we have monthly, we are trying to look at if there are any air conditioning or mechanical system that can be affected by this. And for that particular reason, the projects for one of the fire stations can be the HVAC system can be financed by the ESP, the CDBG CV, whereas the city mechanical system cannot be compensated by that.
Marcia?
And just another follow-up then. So
Please.
you have a regular process by which you monitor how those monies are being drawn down to make sure you're meeting the guidelines, the timeliness and such.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I don't know, is the auditor included in those, that she would know how those funds are planned to be dispersed?
The auditor is more than welcome to include these things. Yes, absolutely. And in fact,
I just want to be able to look at the checks and balances.
yes, we have provided the auditor all the reports that we had, and she was in our office asking for all this information.
And just
So-
a comment, because this is something I'm familiar with. It is a very tricky with all these different funding streams, checks and balances. So I think that as long as these are being done on a timely basis, that you're looking at the funds, making decisions, what pot of money is most flexible, I'm satisfied with it. But I think sometimes it gets very confusing because there's so many different funding streams with so many different requirements that you have to make sure you're always doing the balancing act. Thank you.
Sorry, Maria. I just want to give Wes a chance. He has his hand up. Go ahead, Wesley.
Yes, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but just to get in my mind, it's faster to get the money to these people in need through ARPA than it is the way Maria was saying.
Yes, is the short answer.
Okay, great.
Did that cover it, Councilman?
Yes, thank you.
Maria?
No, I just want to say that, yes, what Mr. Alvarado said is right. The money had to be dispersed just for the purpose of COVID related. And obviously, if we don't spend the money, but that's the nature, by the deadline, the money had to, we
lose it.
We lose it.
Yes.
Yes.
To be clear, The administration is not sitting on any money or holding any money. It is a line of credit, and we need this buffer to keep people off the street. That should be the takeaway. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jamar. Yes, Melissa.
Wait, so what she just said, so there's a deadline to use the 250,000?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right.
No, so the balance remain, according to what I understand, the balance remaining consists of a variety of grants and funding streams, right? Some are COVID specific. So if we don't use the COVID specific, we could lose it, right? But however, we come in contact with constituents that are facing evictions and so on, and the $250,000 allows the flexibility to provide them with the immediate assistance versus walking them through that entire process that may take longer than they have, right? Thank you. Anyone else? Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Mr. Abadalo. All right, so that takes us to E, Bill 27-2022, amending City Code, Section 576-502, parking zones established, traffic control to remove metered parking on the 100, 200, and 300 blocks of North 9th Street. This was introduced at the March 14th regular meeting. Any comments regarding that or questions? Yes, Councilwoman Ventura, sorry.
I don't know. I just feel I'm like in between
Sure, tell us why.
because I understand people live there, but is there business? There is businesses there, right?
Yes.
But is it not enough that we're removing it or?
Good, that's a good question. The 200, 300 block of North 9th Street has always been treated as like a business corridor, sort of kind of extensive of downtown. However, after the parking authority put those meters up, we've got a influx of inquiries and complaints, right, about the ticketing. So the mayor took an interest of taking a look at the neighborhood to see exactly what was taking place. So obviously, as you know, the purpose of parking meters is to keep cars moving along. So if you have a business, you don't have people parking in front of your business all day long because you won't have customers. So we believe the premise of putting those meters was to address that issue. But after 3 or 4 months of this pilot program, it became more clear that most of the businesses there, not all of them, a lot of them are really walk-to businesses, and residents were being much more adversely impacted than we expected because, you may have a store on the first floor, but you have apartments upstairs, but a lot of times it's walk-in pedestrian customer base that you have people driving to. So it really, when we're weighing everything out, right, of the idea of supporting the business and then the residents, there's only a few businesses that had regular drive-up customers, if you would, for lack of a better word, and the negative impact on the residents was pretty substantial, where we decided that it wasn't meeting the goal. So we decided pulling out the meters was the best thing to do.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, so we'll move on to Bill 28-2022, amending City of Reading Code Section 576-403, parking prohibited in certain areas by requiring parking stalls on city streets and requiring that vehicles be parked between the stall lines. No portion of a vehicle shall be located on or over a line designating a parking space, but shall be located within a single marked space. No vehicle shall be permitted to occupy more than one parking space at a time, and this was also introduced at our March 14th meeting. Yes, Marcia?
Well, hold on. This ordinance can be replaced by the resolution that is D under the resolution section, because it's a temporary program, a pilot.
So
Are we supposed to table it?
No, withdraw it.
Withdraw it.
So we're withdrawing the ordinance, but action one is a resolution because
it's a pilot.
Right.
Is that pilot area designated?
Yes.
Where?
Yeah, did we get
I
where?
believe,
Yes, that's attached to the resolution.
Oh, all right.
I believe we would, and I'm jumping on agenda, you would table that resolution tonight because the parking authority is going to be coming. Is that part of what they're going to talk about?
The ordinance can be withdrawn, and then they'll come to talk about the
Resolution, so we'll table the resolution
Right.
because, because
Okay.
there's a lot of data I don't have with me that talks about how we're going to increase parking spaces, but I don't have that in front of me, so I think it deserves a whole presentation.
Okay, so during the consent agenda time, I'm requesting that that other bill be withdrawn. Okay. And then we're tabling the resolution. Okay. Right, yes. When is the parking scheduled to meet with us? Okay. Mhm. Okay, and then we have introduction of new ordinances and the ritual, right? The tradition is that Councilwoman, no? You're gonna defer? But- Okay. Go through them. Now. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Wesley, do you have the introduction of the new ordinances?
Yeah.
You'll be reading, yeah. No, I'll go through them. I just want to make sure he has them readily available so he can read them. Okay, great. All right, so we have ordinance A, amending the 2022 Fund 43 City Facilities Construction Fund budget. What? Amending the 2022 Fund 43 City Facilities Construction Fund budget. It's providing an additional. Is there a typo here? Fund budget, there's a, yeah. By providing an additional 400,000 for the sidewalk replacement program, the funds will be paid by a budget amendment in the city's facilities construction fund budget. Are we ready to discuss that now, or go ahead, Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Council Vice President. So just want to clarify, it's not an additional 4,000. This is to create an appropriation of 400,000 to spend the money that council set aside for sidewalk repair quite a few years ago. So this just creates an expenditure line so we can get that program off the ground.
So how should this read? Okay, so just providing 400,000.
Yes.
Yes, Marcia.
Just a clarification so that Wes understands what we're doing when he reads it into the record.
Yes, go for it, Marcia.
Okay, so Wes, are you following what we're saying as far as what we're removing with the wording for ordinance A?
Can you explain it again, please?
Okay, so the way that it's going to be worded is amending the 2022 Fund 43 City Facilities Construction Fund by providing $400,000. So we're removing the word "and additional."
Oh, okay. I get it.
Okay,
Councilman President?
Yeah, so we're just going to need an update on that program before we vote on this in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I forget the
Okay.
next meeting date. I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
Fair. The next ordinance reads authorizing the mayor to accept land donated by the Honorable Arthur E. and Louise C. Grimm at 2049 Hessian Boulevard in the city of Reading and conveying a city-owned undeveloped parcel on New Holland Road to Burke's Nature. Can we get somewhat of an explanation, please?
I believe we'll have a presentation. This
Okay.
requires a presentation
Okay,
from the
Mhm.
Burst Conservancy and a joint presentation. before
so
we vote
next
on it.
committee of the whole?
When it's scheduled, yeah.
Okay.
Defer to Linda. Is the 11? Okay, got it. Okay.
Okay.
can I just make a comment?
Yes, Marcia.
Okay, just to let you know that when this was initially being discussed, because the property considered it's bordering Mineral Spring Park in District 2, that I did have conversations with the Honorable Judge Grimm, and he went through the administration, and then the work was with Burke's Nature. So when we go for the explanation, I'll be able to sort of explain what that actually looks like as far as that piece of land.
Thank you. Okay, the next ordinance, amending by eliminating City Code Chapter 23, Part 2, Penn Square Commission, Chapter 396 Parks, Part 2, Penn Square, and the permitting process, which is inconsistent with chapter 576 and reserving part 2 for future use. It's a lot of words.
It is a lot, and I think is this part on the agenda got kind of confused because Linda and I went back and forth on exactly what we wanted to do. I think where we ended up on was everything about the Penn Square Commission is just being listed as reserved. So you'll still, you'll see it there, but you'll know it's not in effect right now. So, right, what we're trying to focus on is our special events permit process. And there was an entire section of the Parks Code that referred to this Penn Square Commission, which has been defunct for at least 15 years or 20 years.
So this is kind of a housekeeping item.
Yeah, it cleans up the ordinance, makes it more obvious to someone who is applying for a permit for a special event, whether that special event's in a park or on a city street. They'll know which applies to them. So there was one section in the Parks Code that referred to permits that could be confused with the special events. And then there's the entire part in both the Parks Code and in the boards and commissions section of our code that referred to this Penn Square Commission. And we, I think in talking to Linda, we kept it because when DID was authorized, there was a thought someday we might go back to the Penn Square Commission. So it was kept, and I saw no reason to just eliminate it. If we, in sometime in the future, decide to go back, it'll be there. And
So-
it could just be like a flipping a switch.
So the areas identified as Penn Square are on Penn Street.
No, it's huge. It goes, I think, from Franklin to Walnut and up from like 4th to 10th. So it's really broad.
And then it's permits relating to that specific area?
Yeah, but it hasn't been in effect since before DID, at least.
Okay,
So it's for that part of it is housekeeping, just not getting rid of it, but making it clear that it's inactive.
Because we have an internal team that's going through the special events permit. As they were going through the special events permit, this came up and we're looking for consistent language, and there was just no reason to have that. At the next council meeting, we plan to introduce some housekeeping, I guess, with the current special events ordinance. So that'll be introduced on the 11th to be considered on the 28th. But it's just part of
Okay.
that internal process of cleaning things up, updating it. It's totally that kind of process.
okay. Any comments? So we'll wait for that presentation as well then. Okay, then that takes us to resolutions. We have Resolution A, appointing Susan Williams to the Charter Board. Would you be making some comments, Marcia?
Just a clarification that we have had Susan on before. I think you guys all know who we're referring to. So she stepped off and is willing to step back on. And I think the whole committee is pretty well excited about
Mhm.
that.
No, agree. All right, the following resolution are to reappoint Richard Wagner to the Human Relations Commission.
Mhm.
Okay. And then Resolution C, confirming the appointment of Christopher Geltz. Am I pronouncing his last name correctly?
Mhm.
As Chief Building Official for the City of Reading. I've heard very positive things about him already. So great job, team. Okay, and then it takes us to public comments, but I know we don't have any speakers. Anything else? Anything else we should be covering? No? Are we good?
Executive committee?
So then are we adjourning this meeting and we'll starting back at what time?
That we didn't have a chance to discuss, otherwise we're gonna go into executive.
I do have one,
What?
like 2 items, so, and I wrote them down because, All right, so Fifth and Douglas, and I know we've been corresponding, Linda and the body, but we need to figure out how to make that intersection safe.
Right. I will have an email. I'm working on now for our engineer about suggested improvements for Fifth and Douglas. I mean, off the surface, having a stop sign there isn't necessarily practical because of traffic flow, but there can be traffic improvements, enhancements to address some other issues. So I'm working on giving following up with you of an email that you can share with the rest of the body. And I'm also following up with Councilman Butler on his request about 13th and Pike. So work in progress. You should get
Okay.
emails shortly with some of recommendations for those two sites.
Donna?
And I had noted, being the representative to RATS, we do need to work with Mike Riebert and the PennDOT folks, which you're doing already, Frank, because they're going to request, they're willing to work with us as a city on this, on 18th and Perkiomen and several others. So their advice to me at the last RATS meeting was to make sure we send a letter and or email, and it should go to Michael Riebert, who is the chair of RATS as well as the District 5 PennDOT engineer in charge, so that the city can then work on traffic studies, engineering studies, because it is far more complex than we would like it to be. But Fifth Street's a PennDOT, is a state road. Perkiomen is, just as Schuylkill is in my district. So we always have to work through PennDOT for these kind of things.
Now,
Yes.
so,
Sure.
yeah, Fifth and Douglas and Fifth and Ole
Yeah. Fifth and Ole's
are the
in-
only two intersections between Fifth and Robinson and I believe Fifth and Bigham,
Mhm.
Fifth and Spruce, actually, that do not have a signal.
Right.
And we've done, I think, no less than 3-4 studies in the last. And for some reason, they never qualified, which never made sense because they say the cross traffic isn't the same. We did in the recent light upgrades where they put a lot more no turn on red signs up. They did extend the no parking length
People still
on
park.
each one of those corners drastically. Well, some of them do, some don't, but they're still dangerous intersections. I never understood why they didn't qualify for the lights. So maybe the push on RATS here might help a little bit, hopefully, because they're the ones that are gonna, through the District 5 office of PennDOT, they're the ones that are gonna decide.
And then while PennDOT may own the street, don't we own our sidewalks? Because most stop signs are on the sidewalk.
Well, but you can't put them on a state road
Yeah.
just because they're on the
It's the public
sidewalk.
I'm just trying to.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. Yeah,
Right.
it doesn't work like that. They'll just take the
Because-
road away. I mean,
Right.
that wouldn't work. So, no,
Okay.
but yeah, so let's see what RATS can
I
do. I think that's
tried.
the right push. If Donna
Okay.
can continue to lean on RATS
Okay.
and demand some
Yeah.
kind of work, because usually the District 5 officials from PennDOT are there.
Oh, they always are.
Yeah, and they're the ones that can make
They
the,
run the meetings, Jeff. so,
yeah, they can override the.
yeah.
And then I have another issue brought to me by a constituent, and it's regarding like the noise ordinance. So what, what does a constituent do? Whether it's music blasting from vehicles, whether it's, how does noise ordinance get addressed? Hi, Chief, do you have the answer to that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, my audio was cutting in. I only caught the end of that about the noise ordinance. How do we address the noise violations within the context of the ordinance?
Right, so if a constituent first, do they call you or the police department to complain about noise? And then how does that get handled?
Right, so I'll give you an example. If we have a home that there's loud music coming from, they can call the non-emergency line. Actually, Christian, right on cue, just put that up in the chat. They can call the non-emergency line at City Hall, and we'll send an officer out. If the music is loud upon the arrival of the officer, they can immediately issue a citation if it meets the parameters of the noise violation ordinance, which there is really no time. There's time limits in there for certain things, but there's no time limit if the noise is causing a disturbance across a property line, which, as you very well know, in the city of Reading isn't hard to accomplish because of the closeness of the row homes. So if the officer's on location and the violation is actively taking place, they can issue a citation. If it is not, they need two witnesses, so the complainant and another witness to provide their information to say, yes, we both heard the noise. It was both in violation of the noise ordinance as the officer described it, and then they can issue a citation. Otherwise, we can issue a warning to the individual, and then if we get called back again, then kind of go through the same process. The other option that we have is disruptive conduct report, which is for folks who rent their properties. So if you're renting a property and you are committing a violation of any city ordinance, we can issue a disruptive conduct report, which essentially says you're in violation of this ordinance. which is causing a disruption in the neighborhood or in the building in the case of a multi-unit apartment building. And that future violations can eventually lead to you being evicted. I mean, there is an appeals process through the city for someone to challenge that process, but that is ultimately where that can lead. So, if we don't have a second cooperating witness, or the noise isn't audible upon the arrival of the police officer, we can then go through that route as well.
What about cars and their loud music?
Cars follow the same process, so I mean, it's even easier there. So is if the noise disturbance extends outside of the vehicle, it's a violation of the ordinance.
So if a constituent records, gets license plates, et cetera, they submit that to the police department and then it gets followed up on?
Yes, that's correct.
And one last thing, Chief. Obviously, with the gun violence, if constituents start recording or taking pictures or what have you, is there a site or a location that they can send this to anonymously?
So that's one of the things that we need to reestablish because it was very effective for us before. If you remember when we had the dirt bikes and ATVs, when we first started having that problem, we allowed a portal to upload information relative to that through our vendor who handles our body cameras. So that's something that we can actually explore. Other than the iRequest process, there isn't a process for that right now, but that is something we can certainly look into.
Marsha? Thank you, Chief. Go ahead, Marsha.
Yeah, there's to comment to two of your points. One, I found it effective working with neighborhoods. A flyer was made up regarding the noise ordinance. It was passed out by a concerned community member, just so everyone knew what it was, because that was the most common complaint that I was receiving at a certain point. And they were a lot of the community members were very willing to help out to inform each other. And then as far as the gun violence piece, I'm just very interested in what Philadelphia is now doing. I don't know, Chief, whether you've followed what Mayor Kenny is being introduced as far as a way to report issues around gun violence. We just might want to drill down a little bit and find out what Philadelphia is considering.
Yeah, we have a method to do that. We just need to implement that. Like, again, like I said, we did for the ATVs and dirt bikes. It's something that we can probably do to solicit information relative to some of the violence that we're seeing.
Okay, anyone else? All right, so I think we're gonna move on to our executive session then.
All right,
Lynn?
thank you, Johanny. Yeah, Linda, if you can clear out the meeting room. We shouldn't be no longer than about 15 minutes. I would suspect we'll be able to regroup about 5 after 7 for our regular meeting.
Okay.
In the meantime, you can hang out. You're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the. book prize.
So who are we waiting for?
We're just.
Are we
gonna-
disconnected?
We're just waiting for Maria to depart and then
Oh, okay.
we're good to go. And recording to go